Let's go to the next argument, which is the nature of the Quran. Now, the Quranic discourse has been described by Eastern and Western scholars as an intrusive and imposing text, which seeks to intrude into the inner dimensions of man. Now, this imposition is positive as the Quran seeks to positively engage with your intellect and with your psychological disposition. And the way the Quran achieves this is by asking questions. وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. And in themselves, do they not see? Talks about the physiological reality, the psychological reality, even referring to things like consciousness. This is why Professor of Philosophy Shabir Akhtar, in his book, The Quran and the Secular Mind, A Philosophy of Islam, he describes what the Quran is trying to say with these verses. He says, nature's flawless harmonies and the delights and liabilities of our human environment, with its diverse and delicate relationships, are invested with religious significance. Created nature is a cryptogram of a reality which transcends it. Nature is a text to be deciphered, evidences accumulating in the material and social worlds and in the horizons jointly point to a hidden immaterial order. And you may think this is quite interesting for a 7th century book, but the Quran goes even further than this. It produces an intellectual challenge for the whole of mankind. The Quran says, وَإِن كُنْتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِّمَّا نَزَلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِّثْلِهِ وَادْعُوا شُهَدَاءَكُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. And if you are in doubt, talking to crowds, talking to me, talking to everybody, if you doubt this book, which we have sent down to our servant, referring to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon whom be peace, then bring one chapter like it and call on your witnesses and supporters besides God, in kuntum sadiqeen, if you're truthful in this claim. Now, this verse is a basis for an array of arguments in the Quranic discourse, and we don't have time to talk about all the arguments. Historical argument, sociological argument, and a whole array of intellectual responses. But one I want to talk about is called the inimitability and the uniqueness concerning the Arabic language in the Quranic discourse, which Islamic theologians and thinkers argue that it is a miracle. Now, before I get into that, we have to now discuss what is a miracle. We have to define what a miracle is. Now, the word itself linguistically comes from the Latin word miraculum, meaning something wonderful. And the traditional Western philosophical definition of a miracle, as summarized by David Hume in his An Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding, he says it's a transgression of natural law. We don't agree with that definition. Because what are natural laws? Natural laws are just inductive generalizations of patterns we perceive in the universe. If something changes from the pattern or is different, then maybe it's part of the pattern. It's just based on induction. What the profound Islamic theologians and thinkers have done, they've redefined what a miracle is based on the Quranic discourse. And they have said that a miracle is an event that lies outside the productive capacity of nature, which means when you go to the nature of the event, you exhaust all possible naturalistic explanations. And also, there is no naturalistic causal link between the event and the nature of the event. And this is a far more coherent definition. Let me give you an example from the Quran itself. Now, the Quran talks about Moses, Musa, alayhi salam, upon whom be peace, and Pharaoh in the Quran. Moses was told to throw down his wooden staff, and it instantaneously turned into a live snake. Now, this miraculous event, the snake, lies outside the productive capacity of the nature of the event, the wooden staff. Because the chemical makeup of the staff is different to that of the snake. In actual fact, you have to add more stuff to the staff, if that makes sense, stuff to the staff, to be even close of creating a snake, but only the staff was used. So when we exhaust naturalistic explanations, we find there is no causal link between the staff and the snake itself. So this gives us a definition of what a miracle is. Now, this applies to the Quran's use of the Arabic language, because the Quran cannot be described as any of the literary forms of the Arabic language, which include saj'a, rhyme prose, mursal, straightforward speech, maqama, a combination of metrical and non-metrical speech, and the al-bihar, the 16 rhythmical patterns of classical Arabic poetry. Now, interestingly, in classical Arabic, every expression falls within the known literary forms of the Arabic language. The Quran, however, descopes the Arabic language. And the Quran is a miracle from this perspective, because even though it's made up of the Arabic language, there is no causal link between the Arabic language and the Arabic in the Quran. This is because when we exhaust the 28 letters, the finite grammatical rules, and the finite words, we exhaust them, we cannot produce the unique literary form of the Quranic discourse. And interestingly, from a historical and literary perspective, when attempts have been made to produce the like of the literary form of the Quranic discourse, they have all failed. As the academic Foster Fitzgerald Arbuthnot, a notable British Orientalist, states, and that those several attempts have been made to produce a work equal to it as far as elegant writing is concerned, none have yet succeeded. In this light, brothers, sisters, and friends, what we've just discussed can develop into a deductive argument. And listen very carefully. Number one, a miracle is an event that lies outside the productive capacity of nature. In other words, there are no causal links between the event and the nature of the event. Number two, the Quran's literary form lies outside the productive capacity of the nature of the Arabic language. Its literary form cannot be logically explained using the Arabic language. Therefore, the Quran is a miracle. As Professor Bruce Lawrence from Duke University in his book, The Quran, a Biography, on page number 8 said, as tangible signs, Quranic verses are expressive of inexhaustible truth. They signify meaning, layered within meaning, light upon light, miracle after miracle. So we have two key arguments that are based on deduction, not just induction. And to challenge a deductive argument, you have to challenge the premises, and I hope Professor Krauss would do that. So let's go to some contentions. What about Shakespeare? Shakespeare is unique, but this is a very shallow contention. And I even heard this from Dan Barker in our debate in Minnesota, and he didn't do his reading. Basically, Shakespeare is not unique from the perspective of the structural features of language, the literary form. Rather, it's aesthetic reception. The kind of argument we're talking about, the structural features of the Arabic language. And if you look at Shakespeare, he used the iambic pentameter, the trochaic verse, the blank verse, and many English literateurs use the same kind of structures. And if you go to the book, the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography, you will see that Shakespeare has been compared to Francis Beaumont, John Fletcher, and other playwrights. So he's not unique or inimitable from the perspective that we're talking about. Finally, the last contention is, but I'm not an Arab. How would I know? Well, we could use another argument called rational deduction. Now, rational deduction is a thinking process where you take a universally accepted statement and from that draw logical conclusions. And no one would deny universally accepted statements from academia or from authorities that are valid and sound and authentic. Because this is the realm of epistemology, the study of belief, and a valid source of knowledge is actually testimony. If you read the works of Professor Cody and Professor Keith Lehrer in the epistemology of testimony published by Oxford, you will see it's a grounded argument which we could discuss later. So the authentic and valid testimony concerning the Quran is, no one has been able to challenge the Quran and produce its literary form. If that is true, then we could draw logical conclusions without even knowing one letter of the Arabic language. We could say, well, could it be from an Arab? Could it be from a non-Arab? Could it be from Muhammad, upon whom be peace? Or is it from the divine reality? We know it couldn't be from an Arab because they all failed, especially the best Arabs at the time. We know it can't be a non-Arab because you have to know Arabic. We know it couldn't be from Muhammad, upon whom be peace, because all human expression, if you have the blueprint, you can replicate it. Just look at some replicas of Picasso and Monet in art. And therefore, it must be from the divine.